This is City Manager Bill Osborne, and welcome to a special edition of On the Agenda. I say a special edition because today I'm turning, for most of this program, turning the mic over to a guest we have with us, someone who's no stranger to the television camera. Gwen Redwine, welcome to On the Agenda.
Well, thank you, Mr. Osborne. It's good to be back again.
Well, it's great to have you. February, of course, is Black History Month, and 2 years ago, I had a couple of programs that I did on Black History Month, and you were one of my guests at that time, the first guest, in fact, that we had, because we were talking about Black history in Douglas County. And we'll revisit that topic in just a minute, but first I want to tell our viewers a little bit about your personal history. Of course, Gwen Redwine, she grew up in Valdosta. In fact, was among the first African-American students in the Valdosta school system to start the desegregation process. Worked as a radio personality, kind of pioneering in that, and then moved to Atlanta, where she was with for several years, WTBS, and the old, watch this channel grow, whatever that was.
TCG, WTCG.
And then worked for several years for CNN. And of course, we'll get you an opportunity in a minute to talk a little bit about your early days as you wish to. But of course, here in Douglasville, you were the first African-American to be the president of the Cultural Arts Council. You and I worked together on the 96 Welcome Committee, which was the local effort on dealing with the 1996 Olympic Games. But just give us a few facts, as you wish, concerning the days in growing up, and then how you came to Douglas County.
Well, I wanted to be sort of like Walter Cronkite or Chet Huntley and David Brinkley. Do you remember those guys?
I do.
I would watch them on TV, and I had in my mind, you know, I think I'd like to do that for a living. And I was a little girl then. So I knew it was kind of hard to get into that field of journalism, especially being an African American. And in fact, was told by some of my college counselors that I was wasting my time pursuing a career like that.
Right.
But I've never been one to have people stop me from doing what I feel like I want to do.
Right.
And so I started working for a local radio station. They gave me a job. I was the first black person to do news for a rock and roll station.
Right.
I guess they liked the way I did the news, and I stayed with them until I went to Valdosta Daily Times. I was told that in order to get a job in TV, I needed to get as much journalism experience as possible. So then I went to the newspaper, which I was told that was the best way to get training for any kind of job in journalism, and it really turned out that it was very good training for me.
Right.
I wrote obituaries at first, then I started doing some feature stories. And it was from there that I was asked to audition for WAOK radio here in Atlanta. So I drove up in my little car and interviewed, and they hired me.
Great.
So I gave a notice to the paper, got with the radio station, so I said, oh, I'm closer to some TV stations now. So maybe 6 months in, I applied with Bill Tush on WTCG, and they hired me. So I worked there part-time and at the radio station full-time for another 6 months, and then I went on full-time with the TV station and stayed there until I started my own business. I resigned to start a sports marketing firm, which was very successful. I worked with all of Ted Turner's professional athletes.
Right.
They would all often come into the studio to do public service announcements, and I noticed that they were having difficulty getting words out. So I started a little business to train professional athletes.
Right.
So I ended up working with some of the Falcons. Ted's teams were the Braves and the Hawks. And so I had a bunch of Hawks players, a bunch of Braves players. Terry Harper, one of our guests today, was one of my students.
Right.
And Falcons players. And then from there I went into a television venture with a very dear friend in Atlanta. Then I started the television news here in Douglasville.
Right.
Then I ended that, and then I started working on all of this historical stuff. So
Right.
that brings us up to date,
Right.
to where I am now.
So we're talking about Black history, so you've been talking about history in the making
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
But you know, 2 years ago, I did two On the Agenda programs each month. Now, under our schedule on City TV, I do only one program. And the second program I did, I spent time talking with our two African American council members at that time, Henry Mitchell III and Callie Burke Holmes. But the first program I did, we started off, you and I talking about your work on Black history in Douglas County. And the other interview I did, of course, at that time was with Lonnie King, who was, back in the 1950s, led the student sit-in movement in Atlanta, which, of course, was what caused the desegregation of Atlanta restaurants. And, you know, kind of as an aside, I would point out to our viewers that all of our past City TV programs can be seen by going to our website, and we're going to show what that address is if somebody wants to jot it down, because I think those two programs back in 2008 provided some good information, and with what Mr. King was talking about with the sit-in movement and a lot of things, that's living history that we had before us.
Wonderful.
And so, but you know, for our viewers that may have any interest in any of our former programs on City TV, they can just click on and watch those, and especially on those two programs in 2008, would recommend those to people who had an interest. But here we are in February of 2010.
Oh my goodness.
And what we plan to do is we plan to have you talk with some guests concerning Black history. But as you look back from 2 years ago and the work that you were doing then on collecting information on Black history in Douglas County, kind of bring us up to date. I know that's a long-term project that you're working on.
Bill, it's so funny. I've been working on this book on the baseball team for 2 years.
Right.
First, it was hard to get a publisher. Then I finally got a publisher. Now I can't produce the book, okay?
Right.
So I'm still working on it. But I felt that I could not put the book on baseball in a correct Georgia historical context, because I didn't know enough about the history of the state of Georgia in which to do that. So I decided to go back to school. So I started taking some graduate level courses at West Georgia.
Okay.
My intention was to get my master's in history.
Okay.
And but I've got to take the GRE, and I've been studying for that so that I can actually finish the master's program.
Right.
They have already discussed perhaps my thesis being the Negro School Lodge. So I've already done work for that. And I was a 4.0 student when I took those 3 classes.
Congratulations.
So I'm certainly capable of doing the work. I just
Right.
don't know if I'm capable of passing the GRE, but we'll see.
Right.
So I think once I get that behind me, I can concentrate more on how to properly write a book that would be of a scholarly nature, as
Right.
opposed to just writing and not knowing what I'm doing, you know?
Right. Well, we look forward at some point in the future with being able to see the finished product.
I hope so.
But you know, when we talked 2 years ago, there were 3 subjects that you focused on. One of those, of course, was the baseball team that you've been mentioning. Another was basically in Douglasville was the Douglasville Negro School and Masonic Lodge. And then a third was David Howard, an Atlanta millionaire, African-American, who had some holdings, business interest here in Douglas County. But in just a minute, when we come back on the agenda, rather than me being in my chair, you will be in my chair interviewing some people. But I want to tell you, I appreciate you joining me today, appreciate you taking over a large segment of On the Agenda. You know, I wouldn't trust just anybody on being in my chair here. So,
I know. I appreciate your asking me. I actually feel honored that you did. And you know, I do love to talk, so that comes really relatively easy for me. But
right. But when we come back from the break, you'll have your first guest.
Okay. Thank you.
And look forward to seeing the rest of today's program.
Thank you so much.